This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Spartan 117. Welcome to Quality Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. Anthony and Skylar will take it from here. Master Chief, out.
Hello and welcome to Koalatea Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. I'm Skylar Sokol.
I'm Anthony Nicolosi.
And today we have a special guest. He was so ready, but it's okay. Our special guest is Josh, the mysterious third member of KO Koala Entertainment.
Hello.
There he is. I highly recommend, if you're listening to this on audio, that you check out the YouTube video or the Twitch VOD so you can see the quality of Josh's webcam, because I'm pretty sure it came from the year 1998.
There's a time-traveling webcam right here.
It's amazing. All right, so what are we talking about today, Anthony?
So last week, for everybody, we talked part one on narrative design. We talked about how the fuck do people make video game stories when this filthy player gets in the middle with their autonomy and screws up the perfect plan that all of these great writers have, and the difficulties they have, the strengths that video games have, that the video game medium has in making stories more immersive, all this good stuff. Now, we wanted to get Mr. Broncoli in here, not just because he's very cool and should be here as much as possible, but because he's played different kinds of games, definitely than I've played, Josh. Why don't you give us a brief synopsis on some of your favorite narrative, favorite stories in games?
Oh, as you guys know, I tend to play JRPGs, RPGs, these kinds of games that have more lengthy stories, right? So some of my favorite games would be like the Persona series, Radiant Historia, which is a little lesser known, a little gem. Actually, one of my favorite games. I'm a sucker for anything with time travel, by the way. So
you're a Doctor Who guy.
Yes, I am a Doctor Who guy.
Yeah.
Also, in that kind of line of thought, Steins Gate. Love Steins Gate.
It's my favorite anime, but I've never played the VN.
The visual novel is better.
That's what I've
heard.
The
visual novel is better, yeah. I actually tried to watch the anime first, and I was just confused by the first episode, so I went and played the visual novel, and it was much
The first time I watched Steingate, I watched it with someone who had played the VN, so he answered all the questions I had.
Yeah.
How's the Netflix adaptation?
Oh, God.
It's good.
Wait, is there
is
one?
There a Netflix adaptation?
I didn't think so. There are for a lot of animes, though. There's like live action for a lot of animes now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, so have you just one quick JRPG question before we move on. Have you played Charles Barkley's Shut Up and Jam Gaiden?
I have not. What is that?
You should play it.
I should.
That's all I'll say. It's free.
Okay.
Everyone who hasn't played it, play Charles Barkley's Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. The premise is that Charles Barkley had to do the chaos dunk to win a basketball game, which caused an apocalyptic meltdown of the world, and now it's a dystopian society.
And it's a JRPG? Fuck yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Sounds like Space Jam Final Fantasy.
That's basically what it is. Yes, that's exactly what it is. You like recruit like a gnome alien whose skin is made of basketball.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't know.
Pretty
That's
amazing.
what we should be making.
So anyway, speaking of narratives, so what about those stories intrigue you?
Well, I like how, like you said, there is a measure of player autonomy that you don't get in other mediums, right? So, like in a movie or in a book, you don't get to have that kind of interaction, that kind of, manipulation, let's say, of the story from the perspective of the character, right? So because you have this ability to go around and like kind of explore, you get to see different aspects of the world than if you were just looking through, let's say, a television, like a video where it's just showing you the perspective of the camera and it's going from one thing to another, right? You can kind of look where you want to look and kind of investigate deeper things. So, like, for example, you have side quests, you have, different character arcs, stuff like that, where you get to kind of learn about the world more deeply than if it were some exposition, some backstory in a book or in a movie.
Sure, but like I can play like Call of Duty and get me some nice clean exposition.
Oh, for sure.
So what about this game is unique to, like, I don't know what people might be more familiar with playing, like a Call of Duty campaign or something, or Halo campaign or whatever.
For one, they tend to be a lot longer. I mean, they stretch them out, right? So what you tend to have more kind of, I feel. Well, I also can't speak too much on first-person shooters, right? Because I don't play a lot of first-person shooters. But from what I understand, you tend to have a lot more like content in story that is not particularly focused on like objectives, right? So you have more branching stuff. So let's say like The Witcher, The Witcher 3, let's say. I actually didn't finish the game, but from what I've played of it...
Did you have sex on a unicorn?
I did not.
Then you
didn't
even play the game.
On the bucket list. No, but from what I've played of the game, that's a good example. You're not going from point A to point B, really, right? The whole process of the game is you becoming, in a sense, you taking upon yourself this character in a, I hate to say it in a deeper way, but in a way that is more, it brings out what's the word?
It sounds like there's more opportunity to learn about the character.
Yeah, there's more stuff. I hate to use the word stuff, but because it's such a vague word, right? But there are more opportunities to learn about world lore, to learn about the character themselves, and a lot more. I guess just like space to work with.
Yeah. So you like these games where you get to like really experience more of the world in the game.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's more drawn out, and sometimes it's not necessarily the world. Like in a game like Persona, where it's kind of like in a real world location, it becomes more about the characters,
right, and the character development.
Yeah, more about like learning things about the characters, and there's also sometimes like a collection aspect to things. Like, Pokemon, you gotta catch them all, right? There's a lot of things like that where it's like, and that's not just JRPGs, but it is very prominent. There's usually some sort of collection mechanic where you gotta collect all of a certain thing or multiple of a certain thing. Let's say in Persona it would be to fill the Persona Compendium, or in Pokemon the Pokédex, or in I guess in The Witcher it would be Gwent cards, right?
Sure, right. There's enough space in the game to even have these side mechanics that could provide you with some interest beyond just the main scope of the game.
And sometimes the side objectives can take more. Like sometimes you get drawn into the side mechanics so much that you like lose sight of the main story, right?
Sure, that could totally happen with Gwent in The Witcher 3 or other side mechanics of games I've played, yeah.
Now, The Witcher isn't a JRPG, it's just an RPG. But the RPGs and JRPGs are basically, they have the same, like, underbelly, the same roots, right? The only real, the JRPGs have some defining, like, characteristics. Right. One being they're from Japan, generally.
Yeah. Usually turn-based combat.
Dungeons, stuff like that.
Right.
But story-wise, they're pretty similar to regular RPGs. They follow like usually like an kind of a story arc. You have a couple different story arcs that you kind of jump across until you get to like the final, quote unquote true ending. And that's something that's also kind of a JRPG thing, is like true endings, right?
Cool. Yeah, that's great. So I don't know, Anthony, what do you think? I know that
let me say something.
You're really big not an RPG person, right? So like what does this say to you?
So, now I don't. Now I'm not. And that is in large part the time investment required to jump into RPGs in general, JRPGs and RPGs, is quite frankly a barrier for me when I'm deciding to get into the experience. However, when I was a kid, I played the shit out of Final Fantasy. I played Final Fantasies 3 through 10. And I enjoyed them thoroughly at the time. Now, at that time, I had plenty of time to kill, right? It was just like, I seriously, this was up until Halo 1, and Halo 1 came in 2000. So I was like 10 or younger playing these Final Fantasies. And I wanted to touch on what you just said about the side mechanics. So in Final Fantasy VII, I didn't end up, actually, that's not true. I beat Final Fantasy VII eventually, but for a long time, I just chocobo raced the shit out of that game.
Sure.
I didn't play the game at all. I just went for like trying to level up the chocobos, like breeding them. I don't remember exactly how that worked. In Final Fantasy VIII, I didn't beat the game. I just got to a point where I was playing the card game all the time, and I stopped. And in Final Fantasy X, I got to a place where I was playing the water ball blitz game.
Blitz
you know,
ball,
where
right?
you're like
Is that what it's called?
yeah. Which was fucking cool, by the way. I loved it. And I remember I was going up a like snowy mountain, and there's a checkpoint, and I just never passed that checkpoint. I just kept playing blitzball, and I never finished the game.
That's amazing.
So for me, I actually, because we're talking about stories, and you were saying you like the JRPG. From my perspective, the stories in the JRPG in Final Fantasy, in particular, just like. I was always like, let's go, you know, like the fuck are we doing? Like, we're doing all this side stuff. Like, let's move, you know, like, let's go the story. And for me, that's how I felt about the story. I still played the game because I enjoyed like the game, the leveling up of your characters, and I loved getting new summons, and those were badass and shit. But I really appreciate that about the games that I've played. I'm thinking of like the most impactful game story I played recently. Red Dead 2 is probably the best game that I experienced, even though most of it was just watching my wife play it. And that one was pretty long.
That's an RPG. It's an AR.
Oh yeah,
that was a pretty long one. So that's a good example. I don't think I would have ever played Red Dead if it was just my choice. It was because Brittany was playing it. It was on at our house that I like got invested in it. So yeah, there's just the game has to be able to move through story beats in the amount of time that I can allot in a particular session for a game.
Right.
Like,
it's hard to play a game for like 2 hours and have nothing narratively happen and feel like it's worth your time. I totally feel you on that. I've been playing Death Stranding recently, which it's sort of an RPG. I don't even know if it's a Strand type game, as we all know.
The Strand type game.
And that game, like, the cutscenes are super long, and so to like, I really feel, I know when I'm turning it on, I'm committing to at least an hour, if not more. Like, because not only do you like have these long cutscenes, but you can't save during them, so I need to watch them. So I know, like, I at least need to wait till I can play again to save, and that could be like 30 to 45 minutes because cutscenes can be that long.
Yeah, no. Well, you were the other day. You were streaming it in the server, and we were watching this. Like, I mean, that cutscene was very compelling,
right?
But it was like a movie. Like I was watching a movie. And I was after it finished, I even messaged you. I'm like, was that like a 30-minute cutscene? Like legit?
And I was like, yup. Yeah, and it's crazy, right? Because last week I was shitting on cutscenes, right? To go from last week shitting on cutscenes to like being a super hypocrite and playing like the cutscene game, Death Stranding, is so funny. But I think when cutscenes are done this well as they are in Death Stranding, and the other gameplay is such a huge contrast from what's like presented in those cutscenes, it really works for me at least.
Yeah.
But I also love walking simulators and just like experiencing cool environments, and that's a lot of what Death Stranding is about.
Mm-hmm. So, Josh, I wanted to ask you on that front. Now we're talking about like how the time investment required to kind of move through the story. Sometimes, when you sit down to play a JRPG in any given day, what's the average amount of time that you're going to play that part in that particular session? That your average JRPG session is going to last,
or even how long do you have to play to feel satisfied?
Okay,
with your
so
session?
Yeah, this is actually I was actually talking about this with somebody recently. So I will not sit down and play a long form game unless I know that I have at least 2 hours free. That is like my minimum, right? That's my minimum for because I know that if I actually want to finish the game, I need to be able to progress, right? And I don't. I try to get stuff done efficiently, I guess. I know that if I'm popping in and out of the game multiple times, if I play for like 4 half-hour sessions, I'll be like, okay, where am I? What was I doing? So I don't want to go through that, in a sense, overhead of trying to remember what I was doing before in order to continue. So I try to make my sessions as long as possible. And that also helps me get through, like, for example, when I was playing Persona 4, I was just playing Persona 4 Golden, just released on PC not that long ago. I would not sit down unless I felt that I had the time to get through an entire dungeon, or the section before dungeon. So it's like split into like, what I'll do is I'll play a dungeon one day, and then I'll play a different day. I'll play like all of the days between that dungeon and like the start of the next dungeon, right? So there's a calendar system in Persona 4, and I will try to get all of the dungeoning done in quote unquote one calendar day, which will be one play session for me, and all of the other calendar days in another play session.
That's so funny. Yeah, I've played like 3 hours of that game already, and I don't even think I'm at the part where it like starts becoming an alternation between dungeons and that.
Oh yeah. So it's a pretty long game. I think I beat the game, and if I could pull up Steam real quick, and I could say I've played it 68 hours, and that's actually pretty fast.
Yeah.
Because it's the 4th time or 5th time I've played the game,
Wow.
So I knew what I was doing. But yeah, you could easily spend 100 hours on that game if you're like taking your time and like not doing every dungeon like in this almost. I tend to speed run dungeons because I don't feel like spending a lot of time grinding. I don't like to do that if I can avoid it. I mean, there's a certain amount of grinding that you can't, avoid.
Right.
But I try to limit myself because I do think, like what you said, if you spend too much time doing like filler stuff in between story beats, it almost feels like it's not worth it, right? So what I'll try to do is I'll try to pace myself in such a way that I will get at least some chunk of story in any playthrough, or not any playthrough, in any play session.
Yeah, that's like I was saying.
Question?
I got to be able to move through a beat of the story at least on a sit down. And it sounds silly because like the other day, for example, I wanted to just jump into Halo 3, give it a shot on PC. Thought I'd play a few games, and then fucking 2.5 hours later, I went to bed at 6 a.m. because I just couldn't stop playing Halo 3 on PC, which is fucking awesome, by the way. And for those who are listening, it's so good. But anyway, that hits your quota, of a couple of hours. If it's just not the same in my brain to be like, I'm allotting 2 hours to move through the story, or I'm going to play some, Rocket League. I'm going to play some Halo or something.
Right. There's a big difference between what the consideration for playing like 10 5-minute or like, I guess like 20 5-minute games is versus playing 1 2-hour game, right? It's like, it's very strange that causes such a major mental disconnect. And I think that happens for tons of people. Definitely happens for me too.
In their book, Characteristics of Games, I'm struggling to remember the author. They actually talk about that the playtime is in their, these are people with decades of experience. One guy's from Wizards of the Coast. I can't remember the other guy. Garfield? Yes. Anyway, that playtime was one of, if not the biggest consideration players had going into a game on whether they were going to play it or not.
I look up playtime for every game I think about buying.
Really?
Every single player game I think about buying on Steam before I buy it. Yes.
It's important to know so you can pace yourself.
Yep. Yeah, because I just want to know going in what to expect, right? Like.
And you know what? This touches on perfectly something that we asked our audience on Twitter.
Yeah, let's get to some feedback. We have about 10 minutes left, so I think we should talk
about we talked a little bit about and kind of threw out some stories on Instagram, but this notion of we know that AAA game prices are about to rise up to $70, and we asked the community, like, would you prefer that instead of just continuing to increase scope on these AAA experiences, that AAA studios would instead just cut scope, maybe give you something like a 15 to 20 hour experience instead of like a 40+ hour experience at $70, and maybe sell it at $40 and come out every 3 years instead of every 5+ years. And the feedback on Twitter was overwhelmingly, I prefer some shorter experiences. I wouldn't mind that. On Instagram, it was actually opposite. Instagram was saying mostly that they felt that they would prefer to wait longer, and that they had the notion, several people pointed out that they felt that a $70 experience that took 5+ years to make was going to be better. Like, it's going to be a higher quality. That's a whole other thing that we can talk about.
Right. A huge psychological issue with people equating game length to game quality.
Yeah, and generally, right, people just equating my investment into something with quality, right? Like, it's more expensive, it must be better.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a whole other thing we can talk about before. But, like, I would love that, quite frankly. This is something that I'm excited about in these upcoming gameplay experiences that I'm about to have playing through some of these indie games and whatever. I'm looking forward to the fact that they are not that long. You know what if that makes sense. I'm excited to, like, move through a bunch of experiences more so than there's very few worlds that I, like, want to get lost in. Like, I'm hoping Halo Infinite has an open world element to it because I just want to go around a ring. I want to see where the Forerunners fucking, like, fought the Flood and shit because I love that universe, right? But outside of that, I don't really have, like, I don't want to. I would prefer to have, like, I think the thing, this was what I was going to also ask you, Josh, because my experience of the JRPGs was that the stories weren't as impactful as some of the other games I've played, like from a emotional punch, if you will. And maybe it's just because where they were, they just couldn't communicate as much. I don't know, whatever. But that's what I prefer. I prefer, like, a strong moving experience. Maybe it's short. Like Ori was one where it's like it didn't even have much, but it was like a very emotional entry, like especially the beginning of Ori. And, like, I'll prefer that, like a short, strong experience over, like, a long time in a kind of meh narrative scene.
What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, that actually reminded me of something that it was actually a while back that I was talking about with somebody, but short form television shows versus long like multiple seasons television shows, right? And how, like, we were talking specifically about anime, and my friend does not touch anything that's over 13 to 20 something episodes, and I have always been, like, a big fan of long running shows like Naruto or One Piece, that sort of thing, where they have lots and lots and lots of episodes, right? And I think part of it has to do with when you're younger, you have a higher tolerance for kind of sitting through longer or going through more stretched out things. Like you were saying, when you were younger, you had the, like, more patience to, like, go into, like, little aspects of games and stick in them for a long time. I know when I started playing games, I mean, I must have played, I don't even know how many, like, hundreds of hours of Pokemon, just replaying the same game over and over again because it was the only game I had. So, like, part of is, like, as we get older, we have less free time, right? So we tend to want to have shorter and more compelling experiences that we can have in our time frames. I think that there are benefits to that. I think that you can many times have more impactful stories when they're told all at once because you don't have dead time in between, right? However, if you have a more spread out narrative, you have more time to interact with and get to know individual characters. Like, for example, in Persona 4, you could probably get through the entire story without, I mean, you actually can't because you're going to end up doing it on the side, but so, like, exploring social links and exploring your relationship with your friends in the game and pulling out the stories in those kind of side quests, but not really side quests. It's a social element, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is more rewarding than the actual storyline of the game, because you get to kind of you get to know these characters. And I feel like in a lot of RPGs or JRPGs, the story is a big deal, right? You want the story. The story has to be good. But what makes the story good isn't necessarily the I don't want to say the story itself so much as the attachment you have to the world and the characters that you develop over being in that system for such a long time.
I think there's a big difference between like the Halo-esque Call of Duty, you know, campaign style games that have like about like, you know, an 8 to 12 hour campaign, where I would equate that more to like watching like an action movie, right? Or something like that, where it's these set piece events that are really driving the story, right? It's these huge like climactic moments that drive those stories, and I think that appeals to a lot of people, especially like in the modern world. People love that shit, right? But the thing about these long form media, especially video games, is this character familiarity and this character like attachment is something that I think, unless you experience playing games like that and like you focus on them for that reason, you won't really understand that it's like possible to have that like that kind of development of characters, especially just because people are so used to these things where like, oh yeah, you saw this guy's like mom got killed and there you go, that's his character, he's the mom got killed guy, right? And then this guy is he's the like comedic dude on the side who sometimes causes trouble, right? Like that is like the biggest extent that a lot of these campaigns give you on the development of these characters, and that's enough because they're driven by set pieces. But yeah, games like The Last of Us, as Sandsquid says in chat, is a game that sticks around for a while, and so you get a lot of development of those characters. That game focuses almost exclusively on character development, and that's why it was able to provide this sort of character familiarity in such a short-term experience compared to like a JRPG, for example. Because literally 100% of that game, all of the like story content is character development, and just two characters being developed rather than like a whole slew, which are usually the members of like these campaign-style games.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. What you just said about like, unless you go into those experiences, sort of looking for that or trying to focus on it. Because like my favorite Final Fantasy character was Cloud, but that was mainly just because Cloud, I think, was similar in like honestly to like Master Chief. Like they are just kind of empty shells, and like you were experiencing the world like through them, and I like that. In my main protagonist, I guess.
I think, yeah, you're definitely like one of these people who are driven by these event, like set piece driven stories, and you love that because you're a hype man. Like you love hype, right? And it's this like long form slog, not really a slog, but for you, it would probably feel like a slog where you're just like seeing like rudimentary daily activities between these characters. Probably wouldn't excite you as much, but for someone who like really wants to get to know every single character at the deepest level they could, so like you could basically feel like if you met them in real life, you would be like their best friend or whatever, or like familiar enough with them to know everything, like who they are as a person, is like what I think people who play these games go into it. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but
yeah, basically I'm trying to think of another good example. So a game that I played a lot of was Fire Emblem Awakening, and the Fire Emblem Awakening is actually not a long game comparatively. I could pull up the time, but I'm sure. I could play through that game in like a couple days. But what it had going for it was this character support system where you would, after like a few stages of these characters fighting alongside each other, it's a tactical strategy RPG. Like kind of like a chess on like almost a chessboard style.
Yeah, it's like a grid-based turn-based combat game. Yeah,
exactly. When characters would spend like time fighting side by side, they would rank up these support ranks, right? And then you would get a little kind of cutscene with a conversation between those two characters. And there must have been hundreds. There wasn't a big roster, but there were lots and lots of conversations. And by viewing all of these conversations between each of the characters and your avatar also, although your avatar really wasn't so much of an empty shell so much as a character that you just inhabited because in that game, Robin he has his own personality, right? So he's not really so much of an empty shell character.
I think it's rare
as
in
was
RPGs and JRPGs for you to be playing as an empty shell character. That's not really
Yeah.
that common.
Oh, they try sometimes, but what ends up happening is the story kind of almost forces a certain reaction out of the character, and they can't really be a blank slate because the story needs you to progress in a certain way.
Right.
So yeah, but having all of these conversations makes you really feel like you start to know the characters. I must have played over 1,000 hours of that game on 2 different systems, just because I loved the game. It was also the first Fire Emblem game that I played, so it was like a big deal for me at the time. But yeah, I mean, this is sort of the story almost takes a side, like it's kind of pushed to the side by the characters. I mean, in particularly in the games I mentioned, but also in like I mentioned at the beginning, one of my favorite games is Radiant Historia, and I love that game because one, I'm a sucker for time travel, and I love being able to go back, and do things differently. And that game has this huge branching paths narrative thing, and I really like it. While maintaining, anyways, I'm going to get sidetracked. You get so much time with each character, and I feel like this is a JRPG thing. Is you get so much time with each character that you really start to appreciate them. And I'm not like a huge like I said, I'm not a huge FPS fan, right? But I mean, I don't even know how many named characters there are in like say like a Call of Duty or Halo. I can't imagine more than a few dozen, right?
Or even characters whose names you hear more than once, I would say.
Yeah.
Like there are characters who appear for like one scene, right? And that's their only play.
Yeah, so when
Generally,
you only see a character
5-ish characters.
exactly.
Yeah.
When you only see a character like once or twice, you don't have the opportunity to, have that feeling, right?
And you like that. You think that's enjoyable, like getting to
I
know
like to get to know characters. I mean,
Yeah, cool.
I like characterization, and this is the thing. Like, I like the avatar character is not like such a huge deal for me. Like, I don't need an avatar character to play a
You mean
game.
the
I don't.
person you're playing as? Is that what you
No,
mean?
but
Yeah,
I say
you don't
avatar character
actually,
like empty shell character.
Yeah.
Like nameless or voiceless protagonist or whatnot. Silent protagonist, that's the word. I don't need one of those because it's like I lose a slot for a character that I can see develop. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
A silent protagonist doesn't develop really.
Yep.
If they do develop, they're not a silent protagonist.
So, yeah. Thank you, Josh, for that. I think it's really interesting to hear about a style of games that we haven't played that much of. It's really cool to get that perspective, especially just because we talk about a lot of we end up repeating a lot of conversations about the same games on the podcast, so it's cool to have you here to talk about some different games. Anthony, do you want to give us maybe one more quick piece of feedback or from the past week from social media, and we'll just have a quick discussion about it, and then we'll let everyone go. This will be a little bit longer one, but I think it'll be okay.
I think the thing I wanted to end on, and I was going to say anyway, was there's a response from Tucker Kraus, who has given us a lot of great feedback last couple weeks. Him with Sand Squid, Turtle Fist Pump, these guys just keep coming. Mr. Will Bootlin, he's in here somewhere. Anyway, Tucker says, and this is what I want to highlight. The cool thing about all of this is that games, like other forms of medium, offer different options for different people who are looking for different things. Because he says this was in response to the question of would you prefer to have 15 to 20 hour $40 games that take about 3 years to make, that whole thing I talked about, or the $70 long ones. He says it depends on the game. I'd say something like Halo only needs a 10-hour-ish campaign, considering so much fun can be derived from the multiplayer and replaying the campaign. If it's something like a large single-player RPG like Elder Scrolls 6, sure, take your time and make it nice and long. However, sometimes, often in Ubisoft games, the length is padded. So if you're going to have repeatedly similar game loops and grinding like Ghost Recon Breakpoint, then I'd rather it be shorter and funner than longer and padded. So his point there was that he thinks that different games could do different kinds of games could do things in different ways. This is actually, for example, like this is something we can talk about another time, but like some of these games that come bundled with multiplayer and campaign, do they have to? Could you have just like a Halo story that comes out every 2 years at some price and then just have like a kind of running free to play multiplayer? It's a thing that I wonder if we'll start to see in the later generations. But here the consensus definitely was, for anybody who talked about RPG in this response, they all preferred longer,
Right.
like $70, 5+ years. I don't like. There's this again, another thing we talk about, but maybe there's this notion of like the amount of time I spend in it, like the more it's worth, right? So, and I'm okay.
I think it depends
waiting.
what you're trying to get out of it, but yeah.
So, anyway,
I
is,
think that what he said there was really cool and really interesting for sure. That they're for different people. I wanted to touch on one thing he said, which was now it's escaping me.
Some has like multiplayer, like 10-hour-ish Halo, is fine.
Nope, it's gone.
Elder Scrolls 6 is fine. Make it big and long.
Right.
Oh, the game padding.
Ubisoft game padding. Yes. This reminds me of how literally in Assassin's Creed, I think it was Origins or Odyssey, there was a microtransaction where you could buy time savers that would make the game take less time because they would like give you extra experience or some shit.
What the fuck?
Oh, the ultimate, the pinnacle of game padding.
Imagine making your game so unfun that people would pay you to skip parts.
To play less of it, right?
Well, fuck, dude. This is what I thought about Destiny. Like, if I have to pay you money to get the good guns because all the shit before sucks, then your game sucks. Anyway, sorry. That was a quick side rant.
And we'll end on that one. So where can people find us, Anthony?
You can find us at our website, koalaentertainment.com. There you have links to all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places. You can find us at koala_ENT. We've been talking it up on Twitter recently, so if you want to get involved, get in with the memes, get involved with our Halo hype. Halo Infinite campaign teaser is going to be coming out this week, so you can expect a bunch of shit on that. On top of that, you can find us on Discord. So at koalaentertainment.com or in the links to our social media, you'll find a link tree. There you can go to our website and get a link to the Discord, or from the link tree, go to Discord. Come in, do some research, begin to participate in the universe of our game.
As Rollick says in the chat, soon we'll be releasing microtransactions to boost research. He says he'll give us $5 for 100,000 research.
I mean, we do like to give the fans what they want.
I'm just kidding. There's no way that's happening. But maybe look for in the future some of our wallas to start being maybe worth some research, or other things that you can do to gain research that are not paying us money. If you want to pay us money, you can go to our merch store
and get something in return for your money.
Yeah.
That being said, stay tuned on that front. We do have some news in the pipeline for that. But yeah, go to our website, koalaentertainment.com. There you can find links to everything. Join the Discord. We do giveaways on the Discord. We give you stuff for participating in your universe. Sorry, but that is like the coolest thing any studio has ever done.
Dang.
And yeah, bang.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, Josh. I think we'll probably have Josh on some random future podcasts. I don't know.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we'll have Josh on whenever we feel like it would be cool to get his opinion on it. Especially once we get him a mic or a webcam from this century.
Dude, I have my fucking cam link for Canon set up. It looks fire. But
why are you using it?
Well, dude, I got my mic fucked. I got everything all screwed up.
Tune in next week for a beautiful Anthony face, hopefully.
Ooh.
Hopefully.
All right, see you guys next week. Thanks for listening.
See you.
See ya.